posting, or there we go. This is Ted Coine with Switch and Shift TV, and we're really, really lucky today. We have another one of our League of Extraordinary Thinkers, Deb Mills-Scofield from, well, she'll tell you where she's from. She's in, Deb, let's start with that. Are you in Ohio, or are you in Maine, finally?
My body is in Ohio. My brain and my spirit are in Maine. About, I don't know, 10 more days?
10
no,
more.
Less than that. About a week, and then
Awesome.
I'll be up in Maine.
Okay, and when you're up in Maine, you still work. You're connected, right?
Totally connected. I still work predominantly in the mornings or at low tides.
At low tides, awesome. And high tides, do you go into that cold Maine water?
I try not to.
Good.
But my kids and husband, I have. But my kids and husband do. It's about 50 to 55 degrees off the dock.
Okay, now you're talking to somebody who is in the south of
Florida.
On the Gulf side, where the water is about as hot as a hot tub. It's sometimes uncomfortably warm here, which I love.
So, come on up and you can see what real water is like.
I remember.
Well, usually they go in the water at mid to high tide, and then they run up from the dock to the house and get in the hot tub.
Yeah. Okay. Good. That makes more sense to me. Now, Deb, let's dive into this because we've got a lot to cover. You are a fascinating person, which is why I invited you to be on the show.
Oh, thank you.
And let's start with your background. Now, your background is scientist or engineer. You had the highest, one of the highest earning patents at AT&T Lucent.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I did, and I got a plaque that said, I had the patent. And then when it became the highest revenue generating, one of the highest, I got a like a little glass statue thing.
A plaque and a statue.
A statue.
Woohoo!
I know, it's pretty. It's beyond thrilling.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But what is your background then? You're a scientist.
Well, I started out. I went to Brown.
Yeah.
And with two other young women, we started the cognitive science concentration at Brown.
Wow.
So basically, it was the first entrepreneurial thing I did, but I didn't know that when I was doing it.
Sure.
And so we had my advisor, who was head of cognitive linguistics, and we had cognitive psych, computer science, etc. And we helped put the program together. Okay. And then I did my internships over the summers at Bell Labs in cognitive science-like stuff. How does the brain process language?
Right.
The goal was to have AT&T, Bell Labs, and then AT&T sell a system that would recognize speech, so speech to text.
Okay, speech to text. Okay, very cool. Very cool.
And this was early.
Right.
So this was in the early 80s.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, now it's much more commonplace, like Siri. Sure. But then it wasn't.
Well, right, but this is before Siri was invented. Like,
right.
A long
time
before.
This is before the internet was kind of commonplace, although I don't even know what we called it then, but in high school I used the net a little, and then in college I had a terminal in my room hooked up to the Unix machines in the Computer Science Center, and was using Usenet and Newsnet. And at Bell Labs, we were always doing email and all that kind of stuff from, 1980 before on.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. You're talking to somebody who still has trouble. If I find one of those old-fashioned, monitors, I try to warm up my lunch in that. So that's why I like all the flat screens around. So that's my level of expertise in technology. Now, so Deb, you've gone full circle at Brown, though. We'll get there in a second. Tell us now about you're a consultant and you work in an equity fund. Is that correct?
Yes. So after being at Bell Labs and AT&T for a long time and realizing that you can only hit your head against a brick wall for so long,
right,
and you start to get like dense.
You can't let that go. You can't let that go uncommented. Hit your head against a brick wall. Why is that?
A bell wall? Is that what you're going to say?
No, I misspoke. Yes, that is what I said, but not what I meant. A brick
Um,
wall.
so at Bell Labs, I had a blast. You know, you were paid to play, to
Okay.
invent, to just innovate. And then when I decided to marry this guy who left Bell Labs to come teach at Oberlin College,
Uh-huh.
AT&T moved me out to Ohio so I wouldn't quit. And then at that point, I moved from Bell Labs to corporate. And it was just that over time, over 10 years or so,
Yeah.
when the internet was so obvious to so many of us, and that's what the network should evolve to, you didn't need
Right.
a voice network and a data network, and you couldn't get corporate to see that, and they were making all these decisions that we, in our innocent or maybe not naive hubris, thought were
Yeah.
just incredibly wrong, which of course turned out to be true. Um, at some point you can't make headway,
Yeah.
and you've got to recognize that and then either lower your expectations or go do something else. And that's
Okay.
when I decided to go do something else. And I didn't know anybody here in Ohio because even though I lived here, I hadn't really,
Sure.
because I was traveling every week. I used the Brown Alumni Network to start making connections in Ohio. And that's how I started my own practice in consulting on strategy and innovation.
Okay.
And then that's also how I met Steve Haynes, who was starting a kind of a new model for early stage venture capital
Hmm.
and became an equity partner in that VC firm.
Very cool. So, folks, one of the things that I love my leak because I go to them again and again. And the nice thing about being a Switch and Shift reader is that you can go to them again and again because you brilliant minds continue to give us wonderful content for the blog. But one of the neat things is, so I'm involved in the tech scene down here in Naples, and we're really trying to get off the ground. And Deb has all this, startup and venture capital experience. It's a really, really good find having this genius all around me. All right. So you left a company that was too big to be nimble, and is that an accurate description?
Yes, although I will honestly say I'm yet to be convinced that size is the inhibitor
Okay.
as much as it is size that drives management to
Right.
become less nimble. And it's not, what's the right logical statement? It's not a syllogism. It's not that by being big, you have to have management that becomes arterial sclerosis-sized.
Right.
You could be big and have very nimble management still, but it's harder because of human
Yeah.
nature and institutions.
Exactly. And one of the things that I rail against, in fact, in my brand new snippet, I talk about your yeah, I know you're writing one. I can't wait to tell everybody about that. But I talk about your DMV quotient, your Department of Motor Vehicles quotient within your company. If you have too many bureaucrats gumming things up, holding back the people who want to make or the people who want to sell, you're right. It isn't necessary that they do this, but it does seem to be that it's almost inevitable, isn't it? Not inevitable, but almost.
It is, and it's something you have to be on guard and fighting all the time. So I have two clients right now, interestingly, that
Hmm.
have had tremendous growth. One has doubled in size and is approaching $1 billion.
Okay.
The other has probably tripled in size, and they are now $1 billion.
Okay.
And they're really worried and conscious of how do we grow and adapt and not become bureaucratic.
Right.
And so we're working really closely on, when people say they want to centralize things,
Yeah.
why? What is the real underlying thing you want to do?
Hmm.
And then usually we want standardization.
Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of other ways to get that without being centralized.
Hmm.
So if we can drive to what is the core thing you want to be able to do and why you want to be able to do that, well,
Right.
maybe there are other ways to organize the structure to let you do it without the traditional centralized, decentralized.
Sure.
It's not an either or.
Good. Yeah, I like hearing that because I agree, and I'm glad that you're giving companies this type of advice.
Well, we'll see if it works.
Yeah, well, exactly,
You
exactly.
never know.
No, but they
Could
talk
be.
a lot, I shouldn't say they, I should say we talk a lot about economies of scale. When
Hmm.
you have a larger company, you can drive costs down by being more efficient. How about the diseconomies of scale, though, when you have all these higher wage middle manager bureaucrats? And I'm not trying to bag on middle managers because there's an awful lot of tremendous talent in management, tremendous. And you don't want to just throw out the baby with the bathwater. But they can get together and gum up innovation, gum up a sense of freedom at work, and that can be the slow death of your company.
That's why I think it depends on culture, because traditional middle management,
Mm-hmm.
I think, has felt they have to justify themselves.
Yeah,
But if you reward and compensate and recognize them for letting information flow
right.
and connecting people together in the organization,
Yep.
then you might motivate a different behavior. And right now, very few companies do that. So a lot of middle managers know a lot of other middle managers where
Mm-hmm.
they could connect their people and their ideas better
Right.
and be a catalyst for that, but that's not how they are rewarded, compensated, viewed, whatever.
Sure.
Um, it's interesting because I was mentored so wonderfully, blessedly, and
Mm-hmm.
amazingly at
Yep.
Bell Labs and AT&T. And I think when corporate America started cutting middle management,
Yep.
they cut that mentoring too. So there's a pro and con.
Sure.
Who mentors you now?
Right.
So I'm not sure you need as much middle management, but there's a part of me that doesn't want to believe that structure is always the problem as much as it's human behavior that then drives structure, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
Sure.
Don't blame the symptom. Go fix the underlying problem.
Good. Love it. Absolutely love it. I'm working on a theory myself where maybe the people attracted to a given job are going to have different temperaments. Okay, so if you are attracted to a bureaucracy, to be in the bureaucracy, you're going to have the type of temperament that is very uneasy with taking risks
Absolutely.
and making quick decisions. So interesting. All right, good, good. Now, so let's talk about you're a consultant and you're with a venture fund.
Yes.
Both. Okay, tell us a little bit about the fund.
We do, well, we've spent all our first round, so at this point we're just doing follow-on and debating if we're going to do another fund, because this isn't the easiest economy to go in, especially in Northeast Ohio, to go raising, mega millions of bucks.
Sure. Okay.
But we have started out early stage, so what we really wanted and had was proof of market, not just proof of concept. We wanted proof that the market wanted this.
Sure.
We focused predominantly on biomedical devices, given the
Okay.
Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital, et cetera.
Sure.
Also because that's an easier, faster path to commercialization with the FDA than pharmaceuticals, which, you could die before it ever got through.
Okay.
On manufacturing, because that's a strong base in Northeast Ohio, all the way from macro to nano,
Okay.
and also on IT-based applications.
Sure.
So that's been our focus. We have some really cool companies. One of them that I absolutely love is called Neuros Medical, and they make an implantable device that eliminates, we thought it would help. It's turning out it's eliminating pain for amputees.
Wow.
So instead of the phantom limb pain,
Right.
you also develop, what happens is at the end of the limb,
Right.
you develop a neuroma, which is like, it's like a tumor, but it's not benign. It's the nerve cells all bundled together and cause unreal pain,
Oh, okay.
which
Yeah.
is mainly treated with opiates, which
Yeah.
is not a good thing long term.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. Long term, that's a recipe for just disaster in your life.
Exactly. And also it doesn't really solve it. So we've done several in-man trials where we put an electrode at the end of the neuroma,
Uh-huh.
and external, now an implantable device, and the person, the patient, can control the amount of electricity, and
Okay.
it basically just stops all signaling back to the brain.
Wow.
And at this point, it also stops not just the sensory nerve, but the motor nerve. So you do lose movement and control of the limb. But we're finding where we thought it would maybe reduce, it is now eliminating pain
Great.
for days. And people just, you talk to some of these people, and they've been with pain for so long, and it's hellacious.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
really cool.
That's really neat. So yeah, anytime you create a company that actually makes people's lives measurably better, and especially there's so many amputees coming back from the Middle East and Afghanistan. It's really sad. Not to mention just car accidents, etc.
Well, and obesity with diabetes. I mean, unfortunately, this is one of those weird cases you would really like to not have a growing market.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right,
yeah.
But we do.
Good for you for coming from there, but I'm not surprised because you're a switch and shifter.
Thank you.
That's what we stand for. Now, all right. Now let's talk about kids. Let's finish that circle and get back to Brown. Talk about the kids you're so passionate about. Kids. They're all over 18, but what the heck? We can call them.
I think pretty much under 45, 50, you're still a kid.
Okay, good. I kind of qualify in there. I'm 46. Go ahead. I'm a kid.
Well, maybe you're adolescent at this point.
Yeah, I'm not much of a kid.
We woke up.
But I still act like one, so that's good. So tell us about the absolute genius talent you're working with and their air of entitlement. I want to hear all about that. So you were telling me when we were speaking a couple of weeks ago about they feel entitled, but it's not like you'd imagine.
Absolutely not. So these are, one could say it's self-selecting, and by definition, if you're at Brown, it is self-selecting.
Sure.
But actually, after talking to the admissions office there, they do look when they admit kids for these traits. So predominantly, I'm dealing with kids that are starting businesses, be they, for lack of a better term, regular or social entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And there's a special program at Brown for entrepreneurship and a really robust plan for social entrepreneurship. So I mentioned
just in case the audience isn't familiar with social entrepreneurship, what's the distinction there? How does that work?
The industry distinction is that a social entrepreneur is looking for not just revenue, profit, but also impact. And sometimes they're nonprofits, sometimes they're the new B corporations, sometimes they're for-profits. But it's not just making money, it's also making impact.
Good. So it could be a traditional nonprofit where, no, we're not making money, but it could be making money is good, but we have other measures besides, measures of success. Okay.
And making money is a means to an end. So I like to talk about, I mean, ideally I would hope that an entrepreneur would be wanting to make money and meaning, but it's not just looking at the outputs, which I would think of as revenue and profit, but also the outcomes. Are you really meeting the needs of your customers, doing the jobs they need to be done, and making their lives better? And if you don't do that, if you don't provide meaningful outcomes, at some point you don't need to worry about outputs anymore.
Sure.
Might take a decade or so, but
Right.
So what I find with these kids, and their range anywhere from freshmen, so 18, up to seniors who are 22, and in fact later today I have calls with 2 of them who just graduated. They feel that they have a right to change the world. So that's where I talk about entitlement. They don't feel that they're owed anything, which one could think, oh, well, these are Ivy League kids, they do. But the ones I know at Brown, and most of the kids at Brown really don't. It's more of, there are 3 things I see in them. One is their default disposition is a thou, not an I. So they tend to think of the world by default in terms of what's out there, what are the problems to be solved, what are others dealing with it. It's not all about me.
Right.
And that's unique for human beings today, let alone these kids. And I deal with kids at another college where it's just so antithetical to that. So because they tend to view the world from what can I do to make the world better, that leads to what do I need to understand what the problems are from that person or community or customer's perspective versus what I think it is, which also then leads to a view of self-confidence, and yes, I know who I am and I know what my skills are, but if I'm going to solve these wicked problems, I need to work with other people. So collaboration is kind of a default mode.
Rather
than if I work with someone else, it means I'm not good enough.
Right. Yeah.
which I tend to see among kids not at Brown.
Sure. Okay. And also, so growing up in a different generation, there wasn't this sense of, I did not know how to work with my peers too well. I found that either I was kind of sponging off of them, which I didn't like, just to be clear, or I was carrying the team, one or the other, and there wasn't this whole kind of thinking as a group and producing as a group, right? Isn't that something different in this generation of early 20s?
I think in general it's different for most. When I look back at my time at Brown,
Yeah.
The collaborative stuff was still pretty typical.
Okay.
I mean, kind of the view was, you had to be whatever to get there. So you don't need to prove yourself anymore. You need to work together to prove the bigger stuff.
Okay. Huh.
And then at Bell Labs, there's a part of Bell Labs that was collaborative, and then there's a part that was very much, the scientist in the cubicle or in his lab thing.
Right.
So I think for me, the collaborative nature that I see there now at Brown is not really, it is a little bigger and more prominent, but it's not that different from how things were just a few years ago when I was there.
Okay. Well, I know I actually applied to Brown when I was in, so in the 80s. I graduated in 85, and they were kind of like the genius hippies.
Yes.
And at the time, I was a little square, and I was like, wow, these guys are kind of out there.
Well, I was raised in a very conservative, in some ways traditional, in some ways not home.
Yeah.
And so everyone was like, oh my gosh, she's going to Brown? How's she going to make it there? She's like, it's too left wing for her. And I just found it so intellectually stimulating and fascinating and a blast.
Awesome.
It's great to be around people who don't think like you.
Yeah, now I completely agree. Completely. Because I'm mature. I'm older.
But the kids are just, their definition of risk is not taking the risk to change the world. That if I don't do it now, when will I? And, the risk to them of doing it now is much less than the risk of later.
Yep.
And the thought that maybe I don't, I'll have to go work at the store to make the money to do this, that's just not it. And these kids, especially the ones that are doing their own ventures, they're up at like 5:30 in the morning. I mean, I look at these kids, I'm like, man, when I was a parent, I was sound asleep.
Yeah.
They have their day structured so they get their business work done. They schedule their classes. They do their schoolwork. Then they do they've got it like down to a science. I'm amazed.
That is really, really cool. I'm gonna put that quote in the write-up when we post this. That's really neat. Now, so Deb, you contribute to Switch and Shift. You contribute to the Harvard Business Review. And where else can we find you or read you when somebody wants to connect with Deb Mills-Scofield? How do they do that?
I have my own site, which is so eloquently called mills-scofield.com.
Okay.
And I have a blog post there on all the ways to connect. Since I've been posting somewhat with you and more with HBR, and then also at innovationexcellence.com, I've been able to use my blog as a platform for these students and other people to write. So I'd love it if people went to my blog and read all this stuff that these kids are doing. And then not to put us adults to shame, but, to just see what these kids are up to and change that stereotype of millennials.
Well, yeah, okay, so that's a really, really important point to make. I'm so sick of hearing people say, oh, those millennials are so self-entitled or whatever, they don't know how to work on their own. Shut up. Seriously. Every generation, the people who are a bit older they've got something bad to say about us. And this newest generation, I think, is the least appropriate maybe since the World War II generation.
Well, the other thing I like to say, and I think I tweeted this out, was, if you want to complain about the millennials and look at who's usually complaining, go look in the mirror because it's your own darn fault.
Yeah.
Who raised these kids?
Yeah.
So if you don't like the way they are, you have no one to blame but yourself.
I don't know. If you don't like passionate, idealistic go-getters, Maybe it's because you're afraid of them.
It could very well be, and you're intimidated.
Yeah.
But the sense of entitlement I see much more in business in people in their 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, where'd this come from?
Really?
You know, but not in the youth. These kids, at least the ones I see, mostly, and again, it is self-selecting, I know. These kids are just going to, you know, fine, their problems, I'm going to go fix them. We're going to get together and we're going to make this happen.
Good. Good. Excellent. Now, Deb, tell us about your snippet, because I introduced you to the snippet, guys, and I'm dying to read it, and I can't read it until you finish.
I'm dying to write it.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, there are two snippets I'm thinking of doing, and I have to decide which one, because I'm not sure I'm supposed to be writing a book. That I'm not really sure I want to do the traditional book thing, because it's just too 20th century.
Good for you. It's up to you. It's yours.
Right. So one snippet that Snippet wants me to, they like both of these, so I have to figure out. One would be about all these different entrepreneurs, these kids I've been working with, and what has been the thing they've dealt with, what's their unique business model,
right,
and what have I learned that I've applied in my practice with my clients from what these 19, 20, 21-year-olds are doing.
Okay.
So that's one of the snippets. And then the other is this Blue Lobsters theme I've been having, which is the network is critical and it's how you innovate. And the network is a gift you give. It's not for you. Adam Grant's new book, Give and Take, is just like totally, is it up there?
Adam Grant's new book, in its place of prominence. You know, by the way, Adam Grant is our idol, you and me. And I have to have him on Switch and Shift TV. I'm going to send him a link to this after we're done. So go ahead. What were you saying about Adam?
Well, it's just that whole concept of most people view the network as it's all about them.
Yeah.
And I think the network is a gift that's given to you to use for others. And so we kind of have this joke that the way Brown does networking is you do for me, or I'll do for you if you do for somebody else. Not tit for tat. It's tit for someone else's tat.
So, yeah, so pay it forward.
Exactly. And so the Blue Lobsters is that theme, and by doing that, you create more innovation, you enrich the environment, you make great things happen. Blue Lobsters are found in either 1 in a million or 1 in 2 million, depending on what study you read.
Sure.
And because of where we live up in Maine, on the other side of the peninsula is the University of Maine's Darling Marine Center. They study blue lobsters, so we tend, and then they dump them back literally into our harbor. So we tend to have a higher percentage of blue lobsters than normal.
And I'll bet they're delicious. No, I'm joking. That was a joke. It was a joke.
Have you eaten a blue lobster? Oh my gosh, I have to go now.
No, that's totally joking. Can you imagine?
Actually, blue lobsters,
and you eat it. That's
on the west coast of Europe, there is a type of blue lobster that's very common and is eaten. But the point is they're rare, so you need to put yourself, expand your network, embrace serendipity, and that's how you discover more blue lobsters. Okay. So that's the other snippet thing I'm going to do, and I have to decide which one, but I love snippet.
I'm dying to read them both. And
me too.
And I guess what I'll do is, because we've been talking about snippet, at the end of this, I will put a link to the snippet interview I did with CJ a while back.
And your book, your snippet.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I wrote one.
Oh, fancy that.
Which just came out. I'm very excited.
Oh, fancy that.
Yeah, it's so much cooler than a book. You're right. Yeah. All right, Deb, I want to thank you very much for, well, I don't want to get mushy. I want to thank you for being my friend. And I want to thank you for coming on Switch and Shift TV today. You are awesome.
Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Okay.
All right. Hasta la pasta. Let's turn this off.